"This woman doesn't even deserve to clean toilets," Major Cole bellowed deliberately, kicking over Sarah Mitchell's cleaning bucket so the dirty water splashed across her uniform. The entire Fort Bragg base knew her as the pathetic janitor who never fought back. What they didn't know was that those trembling hands had once eliminated high-value targets from over a mile away. They had no idea the woman scrubbing their floors was a ghost who had vanished from the most classified unit in military history, and when the truth finally surfaced, Major Cole would wish he'd never been born. BD Stories. Viewers, drop your wildest guesses below about Sarah's real identity. Whoever gets closest gets exclusive spoilers for next week's episode. Major Cole slammed his coffee cup down on the mahogany conference table, the sound echoing through the sterile briefing room at Fort Bragg. "This place looks like garbage," he barked, his cold gray eyes scanning the spotless surface that Sarah Mitchell had just finished polishing. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face, as he deliberately knocked over a stack of papers, watching them scatter across the floor. Sarah kept her head down, her shoulders hunched beneath the faded gray custodial uniform that hung loose on her small frame. Her dirty blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she moved with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned to disappear in plain sight. The 6 other officers filing into the room barely glanced at Sarah as she knelt to collect the scattered documents. Their polished boots clicked against the tile floor in perfect rhythm, each man carrying himself with the rigid confidence that came from years of commanding respect through rank and intimidation. Major Cole straightened his uniform jacket, the rows of ribbons and medals catching the light as he prepared to deliver what he clearly considered a masterclass in military hierarchy. "You know what the problem with this country is?" he announced to his audience, his voice dripping with practiced authority. "We've gone soft, started letting feelings override facts, started putting diversity over capability." His eyes locked onto Sarah's bent form as she continued cleaning, her movements steady and methodical, despite the obvious tension radiating from every line of her body. Captain Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his chair, exchanging a quick glance with Lieutenant Harris, but neither man spoke up as Cole continued his tirade. "Women," he spat the word, leaving his mouth like something distasteful. "They belong in kitchens and classrooms, not on battlefields or military bases. But here we are hiring them to clean our facilities because some bureaucrat in Washington thinks it makes us look progressive." Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the cleaning cloth tighter, but she didn't look up. Cole noticed the subtle reaction and smiled, sensing an opportunity to demonstrate his point to his captive audience. "Hey, cleaning lady," he called out, his tone deliberately condescending. "Yeah, you with the mop. You're moving too slow. A real soldier would have this place spotless by now." The other officers watched in uncomfortable silence as Cole stood up and walked deliberately to the coffee station, where he accidentally knocked over the full pot, sending hot coffee cascading across the floor Sarah had just mopped. The dark liquid spread in a growing puddle, steam rising from the surface as it mixed with the cleaning solution she had carefully applied just minutes earlier. "Oops," Cole said with mock concern, his voice betraying not a hint of genuine remorse. "Looks like you'll need to clean that up too. Better hurry before it stains permanently." Sarah finally looked up, her blue eyes meeting his for just a brief moment, and Cole saw something there that made him pause. Not fear or submission, but a carefully controlled intensity that seemed oddly familiar. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached for the mop bucket. But Cole wasn't finished with his demonstration. As Sarah began cleaning up the spilled coffee, he walked over to the weapons display case that dominated one wall of the briefing room. Inside, behind reinforced glass, sat an M4 carbine that had been giving the armory trouble all week, a persistent jamming issue that had frustrated 3 different technicians and forced the cancellation of yesterday's training exercise. Cole unlocked the case with his personal key and hefted the weapon, checking to make sure the safety was engaged, before turning back to his audience with a predatory grin. "This is what real power looks like, gentlemen," he announced, running his hand along the rifle's barrel. "Precision engineering, deadly capability, the kind of tool that separates warriors from wannabes." He glanced down at Sarah, who had paused in her cleaning to watch him handle the weapon with obvious unease. "I bet our little custodian here has never even seen a real weapon before. Have you, sweetheart?" Without warning, Cole tossed the rifle towards Sarah's feet, where it landed with a metallic clatter that made everyone in the room flinch. The weapon skidded across the wet floor, coming to rest just inches from where she knelt with her cleaning supplies. "There you go," Cole said with false generosity. "Clean that off too, while you're at it. And be careful. That's military hardware, not some toy you can afford to break." The other officers watched in growing discomfort as Sarah stared down at the weapon, her body completely still, except for the slight tremor in her hands. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of boots marching in formation somewhere outside the building. Cole crossed his arms over his chest, clearly enjoying the spectacle he had created and the obvious discomfort of his subordinates. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of simply wiping down the exterior of the rifle as everyone expected, Sarah reached out and picked up the weapon with a confidence that seemed to come from nowhere. Her small hands moved over the M4 with practiced ease, her fingers finding the magazine release and ejecting the empty clip with a smooth, economical motion that spoke of muscle memory rather than luck. The officers leaned forward in their chairs, suddenly paying attention as Sarah's entire demeanor seemed to shift before their eyes. Her shoulders straightened, her breathing became more controlled, and her movements took on a precision that was almost mechanical in its efficiency. She field-stripped the weapon in less than 30 seconds, laying out each component in perfect order on the floor beside her. Cole's confident smile began to fade as Sarah worked her hands, moving with the kind of expertise that could only come from thousands of hours of practice. She located the jammed cartridge that had been plaguing the armory technicians, extracted it with a quick twist of her cleaning rod, and began reassembling the weapon with a speed that left the room in stunned silence. The clicking of metal components fitting together seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly tense atmosphere, each sound a testament to skills that no custodial worker should possess. When Sarah finished, she performed a functions check that would have impressed a drill sergeant, testing the action and verifying that every component was working properly before engaging the safety and setting the rifle down with obvious respect for its capabilities. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, as every man in the room tried to process what they had just witnessed. Sarah slowly stood up, her uniform somehow looking less shabby now that she carried herself with proper military bearing, and looked directly at Major Cole for the first time since entering the room. The weapon had a double feed malfunction caused by a worn extractor spring, she said in a voice that was no longer whisper quiet but carried the clear, authoritative tone of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Someone also tampered with the trigger mechanism, probably tried to adjust the pull weight without proper tools. If this rifle had been fired in its previous condition, it could have suffered a catastrophic failure that would have seriously injured or killed the operator. Who had taught Sarah these impossible skills? And why did she know so much about weapons sabotage? Major Cole felt the blood drain from his face as he stared at the perfectly reassembled rifle lying on the floor between them. The confident smirk that had defined his expression just moments earlier vanished completely, replaced by a mixture of confusion and growing anger that made his jaw clench visibly. The other officers in the room seemed frozen in place, their eyes darting between Cole and Sarah as if watching a tennis match where the rules had suddenly changed mid-game. "That's impossible," Cole said finally, his voice lacking its earlier authority and carrying an edge of desperation that everyone could hear. "You're a custodian. You clean floors and empty trash cans. There's no way you could know anything about military weapons, especially advanced diagnostics and repair procedures that stump our own certified armorers." Sarah remained standing, her posture straight and her hands clasped behind her back, in a position that any military observer would immediately recognize as parade rest. Her transformation from invisible cleaning lady to confident technician seemed to have happened in the space of a single breath, leaving everyone struggling to reconcile what they were seeing with what they thought they knew. "My brother taught me about weapons," she said, simply offering no further explanation as she maintained steady eye contact with Cole. The Major's face flushed red with embarrassment and rage as he realized that his carefully orchestrated humiliation had backfired spectacularly in front of his subordinates. The power dynamic in the room had shifted in a way that felt almost physical, and Cole could see in the other officers' faces that they were beginning to view Sarah with something approaching respect. "Your brother," Cole laughed harshly, the sound containing no trace of genuine amusement. "What is he, some weekend warrior who plays soldier at the local gun range? Did he teach you about weapons between beer runs and barbecues in your trailer park?" The insults came easily to Cole, a reflexive defense mechanism that had served him well throughout his career whenever he felt his authority being challenged. But even as he spoke, he could see that his words weren't having the desired effect. Sarah didn't flinch or look away, didn't show any of the shame or intimidation that Cole had come to expect from his verbal assaults. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat nervously, breaking the tense silence that had settled over the room. "Sir, perhaps we should continue with the morning briefing." He suggested, his tone carefully neutral as he tried to redirect attention away from the increasingly awkward confrontation. But Cole was too invested in reasserting his dominance to let the matter drop. He had built his entire reputation on his ability to intimidate and control those around him, and having that power challenged by a female custodian in front of his subordinates was more than his ego could tolerate. "No," he said firmly, his voice regaining some of its earlier steel. "I think we need to settle this right now. If this woman thinks she knows something about military hardware, then let's put that knowledge to the test." Cole strode over to the secure storage locker in the corner of the room and began working the combination lock with quick, aggressive movements. Inside the locker was an array of weapons and equipment that represented the cutting edge of modern military technology, each piece worth more than most people made in a year. He pulled out a disassembled sniper rifle, an advanced weapon system that required specialized training and certification, even for experienced military personnel to operate. The rifle had been taken apart for maintenance and cleaning, its numerous components spread across a foam-lined case in what looked like an impossibly complex puzzle of metal and precision engineering. "This is a real military weapon," Cole announced, setting the case down on the conference table with a heavy thud. "Not some basic infantry rifle that any fool can figure out, but a precision instrument that requires years of specialized training to master." The other officers gathered around the table, their professional interest overriding their discomfort as they examined the sophisticated weapons system. Even dismantled, the rifle commanded respect, its advanced optics, custom barrel, and specialized components representing hundreds of thousands of dollars in research and development. "I'm betting that your brother never showed you anything like this." Cole continued, his confidence returning as he gestured toward the complex array of parts. "This weapon system is used by the most elite marksmen in the world, soldiers who have dedicated their entire careers to mastering the art of precision shooting. If you can reassemble this rifle correctly in under 5 minutes, I'll personally recommend you for a commendation. But when you fail, and you will fail, I want you to pack up your cleaning supplies and get out of my base permanently." Sarah approached the table slowly, her eyes scanning the disassembled components with the same methodical attention she had shown while cleaning the floors. The other officers watched in fascination as she seemed to catalog each piece, her gaze moving systematically from one component to the next, as if she were reading a familiar book. Cole checked his watch ostentatiously, making sure everyone could see his confidence in the outcome of this impromptu test. "You have 5 minutes starting now," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never doubted his own superiority. "And remember, this isn't some toy you can afford to break. If you damage this weapon, the replacement cost will come out of your wages for the next 20 years. But something extraordinary happened the moment Sarah touched the first component. Her entire demeanor shifted again, but this time the change was even more dramatic than before. Her movements became fluid and precise, her hands working with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of countless hours of practice and training. Where moments earlier she had seemed like a nervous custodian trying to prove herself, she now moved with the confidence of a master craftsman working with familiar tools. The first major assembly, the bolt and firing mechanism, came together in her hands with mechanical precision, each component sliding into place with satisfying clicks that rang out clearly in the silent room. Cole's watch seemed to tick with unusual loudness as Sarah continued working her pace, never hurrying but maintaining a steady rhythm that spoke of deep familiarity with the weapon system. The other officers found themselves leaning forward, involuntarily drawn in by the almost hypnotic precision of her movements. She installed the barrel with a single smooth motion, aligned the scope mounts with practiced ease, and adjusted the trigger mechanism with the kind of finesse that required years of specialized training to develop. By the 3-minute mark, what had been a scattered collection of parts was beginning to look like a complete weapon system again. With 30 seconds remaining on Cole's arbitrary deadline, Sarah made the final connections and performed a complete functions check that would have impressed any certified armorer. She tested the bolt action, verified the scope alignment, and checked the trigger pull with the kind of methodical thoroughness that spoke of military-grade training. When she finished, she stepped back from the table and assumed the same parade rest position she had held earlier, waiting for Cole's inspection with obvious confidence in her work. The Major approached the reassembled rifle with obvious reluctance, his face pale as he realized that his gamble had failed even more spectacularly than the first test. Cole picked up the rifle and began his own inspection, checking each component with the desperate hope of finding some flaw or error that would salvage his authority. But the weapon was perfect, not just correctly assembled, but adjusted and calibrated to specifications that exceeded factory standards. The scope was perfectly aligned, the action was smooth and precise, and every component was properly seated and secured. "This is impossible," Cole whispered, his voice barely audible, as the full implications of what had just happened began to sink in. "You're just a cleaning lady. How could you possibly know how to work with equipment that most soldiers never even see?" Sarah looked directly into Cole's eyes as she delivered her response, her voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the entire room. "I served in the Navy's Special Operations Forces," she said simply, each word falling into the silence like a stone into still water. "My call sign was Ghost." The transformation was complete now. Gone was any pretense of being a simple custodian, replaced by the unmistakable bearing of a professional warrior. "And I recognize you too, Major Cole. You were the commanding officer who sent my team into Afghanistan on March 15th, 2021. But how could a custodian possess the skills of an elite special operations soldier? And what did Sarah's military service have to do with Major Cole?"